In the heart of Eastern Europe, where the Dnieper River winds its way through fertile plains, a remarkable civilization began to take shape, a civilization that would lay the foundation for the nations we now know as Ukraine and Russia. This is the story of Kievan Rus, a medieval state that emerged as a powerful entity, influencing the cultural and political landscapes of the region for centuries to come. Chapter 1. Kievan Rus, the common ancestor. In the late 9th century, the lands encompassing modern-day Ukraine and western Russia were a mosaic of Slavic tribes, each with its own customs and traditions. Amidst this tapestry, the Varangians, Norsemen from Scandinavia, ventured southward, navigating the vast river networks in search of trade and conquest. According to the Russian Primary Chronicle, a seminal historical record, it was the Viking chieftain Oleg who seized the city of Kiev, now Kiev, around 882 AD, establishing it as the capital of a burgeoning state known as Kievan Rus. This nascent polity became a melting pot where Slavic and Norse cultures intertwined, forging a unique identity that would resonate through the ages. Under the reign of Grand Prince Vladimir IV, also known as Vladimir the Great, Kievan Rus reached the zenith of its cultural and political influence. In 988 AD, Vladimir embraced Orthodox Christianity, a decision that not only unified his realm under a single faith, but also aligned it with the Byzantine Empire's rich cultural heritage. This monumental conversion laid the spiritual groundwork for both Ukrainian and Russian Orthodox traditions, embedding a shared religious identity that persists to this day. The adoption of Christianity ushered in an era of literacy, art, and architecture, with the construction of grand cathedrals like St. Sophia in Kiev, symbolizing the state's newfound devotion and sophistication. However, the unity of Kievan Rus was fragile, undermined by internal rivalries and succession disputes among the ruling elite. The decentralized nature of its governance made it vulnerable to external threats, a vulnerability that would soon be exploited by a formidable adversary from the east. Chapter 2. The Mongol Invasion and the Divergence of Paths. The 13th century heralded the arrival of the Mongol Empire, whose swift and ruthless expansion reshaped the geopolitical landscape of Eurasia. In 1240, the Mongols, led by Batu Khan, descended upon Kievan Rus, sacking Kiev with devastating ferocity. This cataclysmic event marked the fragmentation of Kievan Rus into a collection of principalities, each grappling with the harsh realities of Mongol domination. In the aftermath, the trajectories of these principalities began to diverge. The northeastern regions, including the city of Moscow, fell under the influence of the Golden Horde, the westernmost segment of the Mongol Empire. Over time, Moscow's princes adeptly navigated the complexities of vassalage, gradually consolidating power and laying the foundation for what would become the Grand Duchy of Moscow. This political entity evolved into the nucleus of the Russian state, with Moscow emerging as a center of authority and Orthodox Christianity. Conversely, the southwestern territories, encompassing much of present-day Ukraine, found themselves under the suzerainty of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and, subsequently, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. These regions experienced a different cultural and political evolution, characterized by a blend of Orthodox and Catholic influences, as well as exposure to Western European ideas. This period of Lithuanian and Polish rule introduced new administrative practices and social structures, further distinguishing the Ukrainian lands from their northeastern counterparts. The Mongol invasion thus served as a pivotal juncture, setting the stage for the distinct development of Ukrainian and Russian identities. While both traced their heritage to Kievan Rus, the divergent paths they embarked upon would lead to unique cultural, religious, and political landscapes. Chapter 3. The Rise of Muscovy and the Struggle for Ukrainian Autonomy. As the Mongol yoke began to wane in the 14th century, the Grand Duchy of Moscow emerged as a formidable power. Under the leadership of ambitious princes like Ivan III, known as Ivan the Great, Moscow expanded its territories, asserting independence from Mongol rule and positioning itself as the successor to the legacy of Kievan Rus. Ivan III's marriage to Sophia Palaiologina, niece of the last Byzantine emperor, bolstered Moscow's claim as the Third Rome, a defender of Orthodox Christianity and a unifying force for the Eastern Slavs. In contrast, the Ukrainian lands, particularly those under Polish-Lithuanian control, faced a different set of challenges. The Union of Lublin in 1569 formalized the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, bringing a significant portion of Ukrainian territory under Polish administration. This shift intensified efforts to impose Catholicism and Polish culture, leading to social and religious tensions. The Ukrainian nobility faced pressures to assimilate, while the peasantry endured increasing hardships under the feudal system. Amid these tensions, the Cossacks emerged as a distinctive social and military class. Originating from serfs, adventurers, and runaway peasants, the Cossacks established semi-autonomous communities in the borderlands, known for their martial prowess and democratic traditions. They became defenders of Orthodox Christianity and Ukrainian customs, resisting external domination. The Cossack uprisings, most notably the Khmelnytsky Uprising of 1648, challenged Polish authority and sought to establish a degree of autonomy for the Ukrainian people. The Treaty of Pereyaslav in 1654 marked a turning point as Cossack leaders, seeking protection against Polish reprisals, pledged allegiance to the Tsar of Moscow. While intended as a military alliance, this agreement gradually led to the incorporation of Ukrainian territories into the expanding Russian state. The aspirations for autonomy were met with increasing centralization from Moscow, leading to a complex and often contentious relationship between Ukraine and Russia. Chapter 4. The Ukrainian National Awakening and the Struggle for Identity. Despite the oppressive Russification policies of the 18th and 19th centuries, the Ukrainian spirit remained unbroken. The 19th century witnessed a burgeoning national consciousness among Ukrainians, often referred to as the Ukrainian National Awakening. This period was characterized by a renewed interest in Ukrainian language, culture, and history, serving as a counterforce to the assimilationist pressures of the Russian Empire. Literature emerged as a pivotal medium for expressing and preserving Ukrainian identity. Foremost among the literary figures was Taras Shevchenko, a poet and artist whose works resonated deeply with the Ukrainian populace. Born into serfdom, Shevchenko's talent was recognized early, leading to his emancipation by a group of Russian artists. While he made significant contributions to Ukrainian painting, it was his poetry that cemented his legacy. Shevchenko's verses, written in Ukrainian, poignantly depicted the plight of his people, their yearning for freedom, and the rich tapestry of Ukrainian folklore and tradition. His seminal work, Kobzar, became a symbol of national pride and resistance against cultural suppression. Parallel to literary endeavors, intellectual societies and movements began to take shape. In 1846, the Brotherhood of Saints Cyril and Methodius was established in Kiev. This secret society, comprising intellectuals and clergy, advocated for the abolition of serfdom, the promotion of education, and the federation of Slavic nations based on equality and mutual respect. Although the Brotherhood was short-lived, its ideals influenced subsequent generations of Ukrainian activists. The latter half of the 19th century saw the formation of hromadas, communities, clandestine organizations dedicated to cultural and educational activities. These groups published Ukrainian-language journals, organized cultural events, and promoted the use of the Ukrainian language in public life. Despite facing censorship and persecution, the hromadas played a crucial role in nurturing a sense of national identity. The Ukrainian national awakening was not merely a cultural renaissance, it was a profound assertion of identity and a declaration of the right to self-determination. It laid the groundwork for future political movements and set the stage for Ukraine's ongoing struggle to assert its sovereignty and preserve its unique cultural heritage. Chapter 5. The Soviet Era. Unity under Oppression. In the aftermath of World War I and the Russian Revolution, Ukraine found itself at the epicenter of geopolitical upheaval. The collapse of empires and the ensuing power vacuum led to a brief period of independence for Ukraine from 1917 to 1920. However, this autonomy was short-lived, as the Red Army reasserted control, and by 1922, Ukraine was incorporated into the newly established Soviet Union. The Soviet regime sought to consolidate power and integrate Ukraine into its socialist framework. Collectivization policies were implemented, aiming to amalgamate individual landholdings into collective farms. This drastic shift disrupted traditional agricultural practices and met with resistance from the Ukrainian peasantry. In response, the Soviet government imposed harsh penalties, requisitioning grain and resources, leading to widespread famine. The years 1932–1933 marked a dark chapter in Ukrainian history known as the Holodomor, or death by hunger. Scholars estimate that approximately 3.9 million Ukrainians perished during this man-made famine. Many consider it a premeditated act of genocide orchestrated by Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin to suppress Ukrainian nationalism and resistance. The collective trauma of the Holodomor left an indelible scar on the Ukrainian psyche, fostering a deep-seated yearning for autonomy and self-preservation. The Great Purge of 1936–1938 further exacerbated the climate of fear and repression. Stalin initiated a large-scale purge of perceived enemies throughout the Soviet Union, including Ukraine, resulting in executions and mass deportations to Gulag labor camps. Intellectuals, artists, and political figures were targeted, stifling cultural expression and dissent. Despite these oppressive measures, a clandestine movement to preserve Ukrainian language and traditions persisted, embodying the resilience of the Ukrainian spirit. Chapter 6. World War II. Battleground of Empires. The outbreak of World War II brought further turmoil to Ukraine. In 1941, Nazi Germany violated the Non-Aggression Pact with the Soviet Union and launched Operation Barbarossa, swiftly advancing into Ukrainian territory. Some Ukrainians initially viewed the Germans as liberators from Soviet oppression, but this perception quickly changed as Nazi atrocities unfolded. One of the most harrowing events was the massacre at Babi Yar, a ravine near Kyiv, where Nazi death squads, assisted by local collaborators, murdered approximately 34,000 Jews over 2 days in September 1941. This atrocity was part of the broader Holocaust that devastated Jewish communities across Europe. The Nazi occupation also involved the exploitation of Ukrainian resources and the conscription of civilians for forced labor in Germany. As the tide of war shifted, the Soviet Red Army launched a counteroffensive, reclaiming Ukrainian territories by 1944. The retreating German forces employed scorched earth tactics, leaving destruction in their wake. The war inflicted immense suffering on Ukraine, with an estimated 5 to 7 million deaths, including around 1 million Ukrainian Jews. The physical and psychological scars of the conflict underscored the strategic significance of Ukraine and the profound resilience of its people. Chapter 7. Post-War Reconstruction and the Road to Independence. The conclusion of World War II ushered in a period of reconstruction under Soviet auspices. Ukraine's rich agricultural and industrial resources were pivotal in the Soviet Union's recovery efforts. However, the centralized planning system often prioritized Soviet interests over local needs, leading to economic inefficiencies and environmental degradation. In 1954, a symbolic yet consequential decision was made by Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev to transfer the Crimean Peninsula from the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic to the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. This gesture of eternal friendship between the Ukrainian and Russian peoples received little attention at the time, as it remained within the borders of the Soviet Union. However, this administrative change would later become a focal point of geopolitical tension. The 1980s brought significant challenges to the Soviet Union, including economic stagnation and a growing desire for political reform. The Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986, resulting from a failed safety test, had catastrophic consequences, leading to loss of life and long-term environmental damage. The Soviet authorities' initial attempts to cover up the incident eroded public trust and highlighted systemic flaws, contributing to the unraveling of Soviet authority. Amidst this backdrop, nationalist movements gained momentum across the Soviet republics. In Ukraine, calls for sovereignty intensified, culminating in the Declaration of Independence on August 24, 1991. This move was overwhelmingly endorsed by a national referendum in December 1991, where over 90% of voters supported independence. The dissolution of the Soviet Union shortly thereafter marked the dawn of a new era for Ukraine as a sovereign nation, embarking on the challenging path of political and economic transformation. Chapter 8. Independence and the Struggle for Democracy. Emerging from the shadows of Soviet rule in 1991, Ukraine embarked on a challenging journey toward democracy and sovereignty. The early years of independence were fraught with economic hardships, political instability, and the lingering influence of Russia. Yet, amidst these challenges, the spirit of the Ukrainian people remained unyielding. The 2004 Orange Revolution marked a significant turning point. Sparked by allegations of electoral fraud, millions of Ukrainians flooded the streets, draped in orange, the color of opposition candidate Viktor Yushchenko. Their peaceful protests culminated in a rerun of the presidential election, ushering in a new era of democratic aspirations. However, the path to true democracy was neither straight nor smooth. Corruption and internal divisions continued to plague the nation. In 2014, the Euromaidan protests erupted, driven by a collective desire to align more closely with Western Europe and reject the pervasive corruption. The movement led to the ousting of President Yanukovych, but also precipitated a series of events that would challenge Ukraine's sovereignty. Chapter 9. The Annexation of Crimea and the War in Donbass. In the aftermath of the Euromaidan Revolution, Russia seized the opportunity to assert its influence. In March 2014, under the guise of protecting ethnic Russians, Russia annexed Crimea, a move widely condemned by the international community. This bold act not only violated international law, but also struck at the heart of Ukraine's territorial integrity. Simultaneously, pro-Russian separatists in the eastern regions of Donetsk and Luhansk declared independence, igniting a brutal conflict that would claim thousands of lives. The war in Donbass became a protracted struggle, with Ukraine striving to reclaim its territories and assert its sovereignty against a backdrop of geopolitical tensions. The human cost was immense. Families were torn apart, cities reduced to rubble, and a generation of children grew up amidst the horrors of war. Yet, amid the devastation, stories of resilience and hope emerged, embodying the indomitable spirit of the Ukrainian people. Chapter 10. The Ongoing Struggle and the Quest for Peace. As the years unfolded, Ukraine's struggle for sovereignty and peace persisted. International efforts to mediate the conflict yielded limited results, with ceasefires repeatedly broken and diplomatic negotiations often reaching impasses. The annexation of Crimea remained a contentious issue, with Russia steadfast in its claim and Ukraine, backed by much of the international community, resolute in its opposition. The conflict's toll extended beyond the battlefield. Economic hardships, displacement, and psychological trauma became daily realities for many Ukrainians. Children, in particular, bore invisible wounds, with countless young lives disrupted and futures uncertain. Organizations like UNICEF highlighted the profound impact on the youth, emphasizing the need for comprehensive support and intervention. In the face of adversity, Ukraine continued to pursue reforms, strengthen democratic institutions, and seek integration with Western entities like the European Union and NATO. These aspirations, while offering hope, also served as points of contention with Russia, perpetuating a complex and often volatile geopolitical landscape. The resilience of the Ukrainian people remained a beacon of hope. Grassroots movements, cultural renaissance, and a steadfast commitment to sovereignty underscored a national identity forged through trials and tribulations. The journey toward lasting peace and stability continued, with Ukraine standing as a testament to the enduring human spirit's quest for freedom and self-determination. Final words. Choose to remember. Choose to stand. The story of Ukraine is not just theirs. It belongs to all of us. It is a reminder that freedom is never guaranteed, that sovereignty must be defended, and that oppression, if left unchecked, will rise again. Share this history. Speak out against injustice. Support those who stand for democracy and human rights. Because history is not just about what has been, it is about what we choose to do next. The future is unwritten. What side of history will you stand on?